Everyone thought it was a simple HOA dispute. They were wrong. What happened next would shake the entire neighborhood and expose a truth no one saw coming. The old garage had stood there for 30 years, quietly attached to the small home at the edge of the community. It belonged to Thomas, a retired engineer who valued peace more than arguments. One morning, he opened his garage door and froze. 3 massive trucks filled the space wall to wall, blocking every inch like a deliberate message. They weren't his. He didn't even recognize them. By noon, the HOA president, known by neighbors for her sharp tone and louder opinions, was already spreading her version of the story. She claimed Thomas had abandoned the garage and that HOA rules allowed temporary use. The words sounded official, rehearsed, and dangerous. Thomas calmly requested the vehicles be removed. She laughed and reminded him who had power in this neighborhood. What no one knew yet was that this wasn't about parking. It was about control. And Thomas had a past the HOA president never bothered to learn. As tension grew and whispers spread, one quiet phone call was made that would soon change everything. And when the law got involved, panic would replace confidence faster than anyone expected. The HOA meeting that evening felt less like a discussion and more like a trial. Thomas sat alone while voices piled against him, certain the outcome was already decided. The HOA president stood confidently, listing violations that didn't exist and quoting rules that had never been approved. She insisted the garage fell under shared community access, twisting words until they sounded legal. Neighbors avoided eye contact, afraid of becoming her next target. Thomas listened without interruption, his face calm, his hands steady. That calm seemed to irritate her even more. When Thomas finally spoke, he simply asked for written proof. The room went quiet. Papers shuffled. Excuses followed. The president dismissed his request and warned him of fines, towing fees, and legal action. She ended the meeting abruptly, smiling like someone who believed the game was already won. That night, the trucks remained. HOA notices appeared on Thomas's door. The pressure was intentional. But instead of reacting emotionally, Thomas reviewed old documents, property records, and something else he had kept for years. A badge photo rested quietly in a drawer, unseen but not forgotten. The next morning, Thomas didn't argue. He didn't threaten. He made a single call and gave a calm explanation. On the other end of the line, there was a pause. Then a sentence that changed everything. "I'll come by myself." By afternoon, the HOA president's confidence would begin to crack. The black vehicle rolled in without sirens, without noise, but it carried authority heavier than any threat. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as the sheriff stepped out, calm and unmistakably official. The HOA president rushed outside, already talking before anyone asked a question. She explained her version, waving documents and pointing toward the garage as if the space belonged to her. The sheriff listened without interruption. His eyes moved from the trucks to the garage door, then to Thomas, who stood quietly beside his home. When the sheriff asked who owned the property, Thomas handed over a folder. Deeds. Permits. Old approvals. Everything neatly organized. The sheriff flipped through each page slowly. The HOA president's voice grew tighter, faster, less controlled. She insisted the HOA overruled personal ownership. The sheriff finally looked up. "That's not how the law works," he said calmly. Silence followed. One truck owner was contacted. Then another. Tow companies were mentioned. Fines were discussed, but not for Thomas. The HOA president's face drained of color as the truth settled in. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was unauthorized use. Trespassing. Abuse of authority. Then the sheriff asked a question no one expected. "Thomas," he said, "are you still listed as retired or reserve?" The president froze. She realized too late that she had never asked who Thomas really was. And the answer would dismantle everything she thought she controlled. Thomas didn't boast. He never needed to, he simply answered honestly, and the weight of his past did the rest. He explained that before retirement, he had spent decades working alongside county officials, reviewing property disputes and HOA overreach cases. He knew the rules because he helped write parts of them. The sheriff nodded with recognition, confirming details the HOA president had never imagined mattered. The garage was never shared. The trucks were never allowed. The notices were invalid. Every claim collapsed one by one. Neighbors began stepping outside, drawn by the shift in power. Whispers turned into open attention. Phones came out. The HOA president tried to regain control. But her words no longer carried authority. The sheriff explained the consequences calmly. Towing fees. Liability. Formal warnings. A possible investigation into HOA practices. The president's confident posture folded inward. Her voice dropped. She asked if this could be handled quietly. Thomas didn't raise his voice. He didn't smile. He only asked for his garage back and the rules to be respected. That request alone said more than anger ever could. The trucks were removed before sunset, but the story wasn't over. The sheriff wasn't finished. And the HOA president would soon learn that power, when abused, doesn't disappear quietly. It collapses in front of everyone watching. By the next morning, the neighborhood felt different. It was quieter, but not peaceful, it was watchful. Neighbors who had stayed silent for years began talking. Stories surfaced about fines, threats, and selective rule enforcement. The HOA president avoided eye contact, skipping her usual morning walk. Emails from residents flooded the HOA inbox demanding transparency and explanations. Thomas didn't lead a revolt. He simply answered questions when asked. He shared facts, documents, and encouraged calm action. The sheriff returned that afternoon, not for Thomas, but to collect statements. Each one added weight to a growing case. The HOA president tried damage control, sending messages about miscommunication and temporary authority errors. No one believed them anymore. Trust, once broken, doesn't respond to apologies typed too late. A special meeting was scheduled. Attendance doubled. The board members looked nervous. Thomas sat in the back, silent, observing. The sheriff stood near the exit, not as a threat, but as reassurance. When the vote came, it wasn't dramatic. It was final. The HOA president was removed. An audit was approved. Rules would be reviewed with legal oversight. As people left, many thanked Thomas. He nodded politely, declining praise. Justice didn't need applause. But one final revelation remained, something the HOA president would never forget. The investigation uncovered more than misuse of a garage. It revealed a pattern that had gone unchecked for years: funds misallocated. Selective penalties. Personal favors disguised as enforcement. Each discovery weakened what remained of the old board's credibility. The former HOA president faced fines of her own, legal fees, and a permanent ban from holding authority within the community. Thomas received a formal apology letter. He never framed it. He placed it in the same drawer as the old badge photo, then closed it gently. The garage was empty again, just concrete and quiet, the way it was meant to be. New board members were elected carefully. Rules were clarified. Power was limited. The neighborhood slowly healed. Thomas returned to his routine, tending his garden, enjoying peaceful mornings, but neighbors never forgot the lesson. Authority without respect is fragile. And quiet people often carry the strongest truth. As the sun set on the garage one evening, someone asked Thomas why he stayed so calm through it all. He simply said, "Because the law doesn't need shouting." And that calm would echo far longer than any argument ever could. Everyone clicked, expecting chaos, confrontation, and shouting. What they witnessed instead was something far more powerful. This wasn't a story about revenge. It was about restraint. About knowing the truth and letting it speak for itself. The HOA president thought control came from fear. Thomas proved it comes from patience and knowledge. 3 trucks were never the real issue. The real issue was power used without responsibility. And when the sheriff got involved, the panic wasn't about consequences, it was about exposure. The garage returned to silence. The community returned to balance. And one quiet man reminded everyone that rules exist to protect, not to dominate. Stories like this spread because people recognize themselves in them. The fear of being pushed. The relief of standing firm. The satisfaction of justice without cruelty. And that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you love the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.